The human edge thriving in an automated world because the future doesn't belong to machines. It belongs to the humans who know how to work alongside them. A note before we begin: there is a conversation happening right now in boardrooms and bedrooms, in job centers and university lecture halls, in the minds of parents watching their children grow up in a world that looks nothing like the one they were prepared for. The conversation is usually some version of the same question: am I still needed? It is an honest question, and it deserves an honest answer: yes, profoundly, but not in the same ways as before. This book is not going to sugarcoat the disruption that artificial intelligence is causing. Jobs are being lost, industries are being reshaped, machines are replicating skills that took years to develop in seconds. To pretend otherwise would be to waste your time, and your time is the most valuable thing you have. But here's what the headlines about automation almost always miss: the skills that make us most irreplaceable are not technical, they are human skills. They are the things we have always carried inside us that no algorithm can ever copy, because they are not the result of data processing. They are the result of living. This book is a guide to finding those skills in yourself, sharpening them, and building a life that bets on them. Not because it's poetic or idealistic, but because in 2026 and beyond, it is the most strategically intelligent thing you can do. Let's begin. Part 1: Understanding the Landscape. Chapter 1: The Machine in the Room. Let's start with what is actually happening. Artificial intelligence has been a concept for decades, but what changed in the early 2020s was something qualitative, not just quantitative. AI stopped being a specialized tool for specialized tasks and started becoming a general-purpose capability, something that could write, reason, code, design, translate, summarize, and create at a level that made the line between human and machine output genuinely difficult to draw. By 2026, that line has blurred further still. AI systems are embedded in healthcare systems, educational platforms, legal services, financial institutions, and creative industries. They are writing first drafts of legal documents and medical summaries. They are grading essays and flagging potential mental health crises in students. They are generating marketing campaigns and product designs. They are conducting first-round job interviews. None of this is science fiction. It is Tuesday. What AI actually does well. If you want to understand where AI is going, you need to understand what it is actually good at. And the honest answer is, it is extraordinarily good at pattern recognition. Given AI enough data about how something has been done before, enough examples, enough precedent, and it will replicate the pattern with astonishing accuracy and terrifying speed. This makes it exceptionally powerful at tasks that repetitive and rule-based data entry, form processing, routine reporting, right arrow, pattern-dependent fraud detection, image recognition, predictive analytics. Right arrow, language-based but formulaic standard emails, legal boilerplate code that follows clear research-intensive literature reviews, competitive intelligence, information synthesis. This is a genuinely long list, and many jobs have been built primarily around these kinds of tasks. If your role is largely about processing information that has been processed before and producing outputs that follow established patterns, then yes, your role is vulnerable. That is not pessimism. That is honesty, and honesty is where useful action begins. What AI cannot do. But here is where the conversation almost always stops short of the most important insight. The same characteristics that make AI extraordinary at pattern recognition make it fundamentally limited when patterns break down in genuinely novel situations, when the stakes are emotional, and when what is needed is not the most statistically likely answer but the most humanly true one. AI cannot sit with someone in grief and feel the particular quality of that silence, then know whether this person needs words or their absence. It cannot look at a room full of people with competing needs and histories and find the response that honors all of them. It cannot feel the moral weight of a difficult decision and carry that weight responsibly. It cannot create something that surprises even itself. These are not small things. These are, in many ways, the things that matter most in medicine, in leadership, in education, in art, in every relationship that actually means something. AI is extraordinary at answering questions that have already been asked. Humans are extraordinary at knowing which question to ask next. Reading the map without panicking. The most dangerous response to the AI era is panic. Panic makes you reactive, and reactive decisions in a fast-moving landscape tend to be poor ones. The second most dangerous response is denial, pretending that nothing is really changing, that your industry is somehow immune, that the storm will pass without touching you. What actually serves you is something in between: clear-eyed assessment. Look honestly at your role, your industry, and your skill set. Identify the parts of what you do that are most pattern-dependent and therefore most automatable. Then, and this is the work of this book, identify the parts that are most irreplaceably human and start building your life around those. Reflection: write down 3 things you do in your work or life that you genuinely believe a machine could not do, not because it lacks the data but because it lacks something essentially human. Keep that list, we will return to it. Chapter 2: The Irreplaceable Human. In 1983, a psychologist named Howard Gardner published a theory that would quietly reshape how millions of people think about intelligence. His argument was simple and at the time radical: there is not one kind of intelligence. There are many: mathematical intelligence, linguistic intelligence, spatial intelligence, musical intelligence, interpersonal intelligence, intrapersonal intelligence. The education systems of the 20th century were largely built around the first two kinds that show up well on standardized tests. The kinds that can be measured, ranked, and compared. And that made sense for an industrial era that valued uniformity and scalability. But we are not in that era anymore. And the intelligences that our systems most systematically undervalued, the interpersonal, the creative, the emotional, are precisely the ones that are hardest to automate. Which means that the qualities that school told you were not quite as important as your grades are now in many ways your most valuable assets. Tacit knowledge. What you know without knowing you know it. There is a concept in philosophy and cognitive science called tacit knowledge, a term coined by the philosopher Michael Polanyi, who observed that we know more than we can tell. Tacit knowledge is the knowledge that lives in your body, your intuition, your accumulated experience, the kind that cannot be fully written down or transferred through instruction. Master surgeon knows, through thousands of hours of practice, how tissue should feel at the moment of incision, a knowing that no manual fully captures. A seasoned negotiator reads the micro-expressions of the person across the table and adjusts, in real time, a process that is too complex and too fast to be consciously described. A great parent knows, without being able to say exactly how, that something is off with their child today, a knowing built from thousands of moments of attunement. This is the kind of knowledge that AI genuinely cannot replicate, because it is not stored in data. It is stored in lived experience. And the longer you live, the more of it you accumulate. The 5 irreplaceable human capacities. Through research, observation, and conversation with people across industries and disciplines, I have identified 5 capacities that consistently emerge as the most irreplaceable in an automated world. They are not exhaustive. Human beings are infinitely various, and your own irreplaceable edge may be unique to you, but these 5 represent the core. The first is genuine creativity. The ability to produce something that has never existed before, that could not have been predicted from existing data, that carries a spark of authentic human experience. Not the kind of creativity that recombines existing elements in predictable ways. AI is increasingly capable of that. But the kind that breaks its own rules, that surprises even the creator, that moves people. The second is deep empathy, the ability to truly feel with another person, to be present to their inner experience in a way that communicates "I see you" rather than "I have processed your situation." This is not a soft skill. In medicine, in leadership, in education, in any context where human beings are at stake, it is the difference between transactions and transformation. The third is complex ethical reasoning, the ability to navigate situations where there is no clear answer, where every option carries costs and consequences, where the right path requires holding multiple competing values simultaneously and making a judgment call. AI can provide information about ethical frameworks. It cannot make genuinely ethical decisions in the way a human being with skin in the game can. The fourth is adaptive leadership, the ability to bring people together around a shared purpose, to navigate conflict, to inspire rather than merely direct, to hold a team through uncertainty and change. Leadership is fundamentally a human relationship, and relationships require presence, trust, and authenticity, none of which can be automated. The fifth is meaning-making, the uniquely human capacity to find significance in experience, to build a narrative from the raw material of events, to create a sense of purpose that motivates action. This is not a professional skill in the traditional sense. It is something deeper, and it underlies everything else on this list. Your irreplaceable edge is not what you can produce. It is what you can be: present, human, purposeful, alive in a way that no system ever will. Reflection. Of the 5 capacities above, creativity, empathy, ethical reasoning, adaptive leadership, and meaning-making, which feels most natural to you, which feels most underdeveloped? This is not a test. It is the beginning of a map. Part 2, the skills that cannot be automated. Chapter 3, creativity as a daily practice. Let us dismantle a myth. The myth goes like this: creativity is a gift. Some people have it and some people don't. Artists are creative, accountants are not. Children are creative, adults at some point stop being. This myth is not just wrong. It is actively harmful because it tells millions of people that one of their most essential human capacities is not available to them. And then they stop trying, and in stopping, they prove themselves right. The truth is considerably more interesting. Creativity is not a fixed trait. It is a process, and like any process, it can be understood, cultivated, and improved. Every human being who has ever lived has been creative. The question is only whether you have kept the channel open or allowed it to narrow through disuse and self-doubt. How Schools Accidentally Teach Us Not to Create. Ken Robinson, whose 2006 TED Talk on education and creativity remains one of the most viewed of all time, spent his career documenting a simple and devastating pattern. Children begin school as creative, curious, fearless experimenters. And then, year by year, as they learn that wrong answers are punished and right answers rewarded, as they discover that imagination is less valued than accuracy and that being different is riskier than fitting in, the creativity quietly recedes. By the time most people reach adulthood, they have learned to be careful. And carefulness, while it has its place, is the natural enemy of creativity because creativity requires the willingness to be wrong, to be strange, to produce 10 bad ideas to find the one extraordinary one. The good news is that this is reversible. The creative impulse does not die, it merely goes quiet when it no longer feels safe. One of the central jobs of this book is to make it safe again. Building a daily creative practice is not a grand gesture. It is not setting aside a month to write a novel or taking a year off to paint. It is the small, consistent act of making something, anything every single day, whether or not you feel inspired, whether or not it is good, whether or not anyone ever sees it. The purpose of a daily creative practice is not primarily to produce. It is to keep the channel open, to remind your brain that you are someone who makes things, to build the muscle memory of creativity so that when you need it in a meeting, in a crisis, in a conversation, it is already warm and ready. Write 3 pages of stream of consciousness longhand every morning before you check your phone. Julia Cameron calls this morning pages, and it is one of the most reliably effective creativity tools ever documented. Right arrow: spend 15 minutes every day in an activity that has no goal, such as doodling, walking without a destination, playing an instrument badly, or building something with your hands. The absence of a goal is the point. Right arrow: consume deliberately. Read widely outside your field. Watch films that challenge you, listen to music that surprises you. Creativity is partly recombination, and the richness of what you can recombine depends on what you have taken in. Right arrow: carry a notebook. Ideas arrive at inconvenient times. A captured idea is a seed, an uncaptured idea is lost forever. Moving through creative blocks: every creative person encounters resistance. The blank page, the sudden certainty that everything you have ever made is mediocre and you are fooling yourself. The paralysis that masquerades as perfectionism. Stephen Pressfield, in his landmark book The War of Art, calls this phenomenon resistance, with a capital R. This force arises specifically in proportion to how important something is to you. The stronger the resistance, the more important the work. The way through a creative block is rarely to wait for inspiration to arrive. Inspiration is not a gift from the muse, it is a byproduct of action. You write your way to the good sentence, you paint your way to the good painting. You start badly, clumsily, reluctantly, and then, usually without knowing exactly when it happened, you are in the flow. Creativity is not waiting for lightning to strike. It is building the tallest possible tower and trusting that the lightning will find you. Chapter 4: Empathy as a Competitive Advantage. For most of the 20th century, the word empathy in a professional context was a liability. It suggested that you were too emotional, too personal, and not objective enough. The ideal professional was someone who could make decisions without feelings getting in the way. We are living through the consequences of that ideal. We built institutions that ran efficiently and treated people like inputs. We created management cultures that prized results and ignored the humans producing them. We developed a corporate world that was extraordinarily good at processing resources and extraordinarily bad at understanding people. And now, as machines take over the processing of resources, what remains becomes the central, irreplaceable function of human beings in any organization, exactly what we spent 50 years trying to eliminate: the ability to understand, connect with, and care for other human beings. What empathy actually is: empathy is one of the most misunderstood concepts in the human toolkit. It is commonly confused with sympathy, which is a feeling of pity for someone, concern, or a kind of emotional adjacency to their experience. Empathy is different. Empathy is feeling with someone, entering their perspective, seeing through their eyes, and genuinely understanding what it is like to be them in this moment. Brené Brown, whose research on vulnerability and connection has shaped how millions of people understand emotional intelligence, describes empathy as a choice that requires vulnerability. Because to truly understand another person's experience, you have to be willing to go to the same place inside yourself to access a memory, a feeling, a fear that connects you to them. That requires openness. It requires the willingness to be affected. This is also why empathy cannot be automated. It is not a behavior you perform, it is a quality of presence you offer. And AI, however sophisticated, is not present. It processes, it responds, it does not arrive. Empathy in practice. 4 skills. Empathy is not a single skill, It is a cluster of related capacities, each of which can be developed with practice. The first is active listening, the art of giving your full attention to another person in a way that communicates what you're saying matters, and I am genuinely here for it. This is harder than it sounds in a world designed to fracture attention constantly. Active listening means no phone, no internal monologue preparing your next response, no judging or interpreting while the other person is still speaking, just presence. The second is curiosity, approaching others with a genuine desire to understand rather than to be right. This shifts the entire quality of an interaction. People can feel the difference between being studied and being heard. The third is nonverbal attunement, the ability to read what a person is communicating beyond their words. This includes tone of voice, facial expressions, posture, timing, and what they are notably not saying. A significant portion of human communication is nonverbal, and becoming more fluent in it is one of the fastest ways to deepen your empathic capacity. The fourth is regulated presence, the ability to stay emotionally stable and available even when the conversation is difficult. This is where empathy meets emotional intelligence. If someone's distress triggers your own distress and you become absorbed in managing your own reaction, you are no longer truly present for them. The capacity to remain steady while fully feeling what another person feels is one of the most advanced and valuable human skills there is. Reflection: think of a recent conversation where you felt truly heard. What did the other person do that created that feeling? Now think of a recent conversation where you could have listened more fully. What was getting in the way? Chapter 5: Mental Sovereignty. Owning your mind in the age of influence. Everything else in this book rests on this chapter. Because before you can deploy your creativity, offer genuine empathy, or lead with presence and live with purpose, you actually have to be there. Present, awake, in possession of your own attention, and right now your attention is under siege. This is not a metaphor. It is the business model of most of the technology platforms that structure your daily life. Your attention is the product that is sold to advertisers. The more of it they can capture, the more revenue they generate. And they have employed some of the most brilliant minds on earth, psychologists, neuroscientists, data scientists, behavioral economists, to engineer that capture as completely as possible. Every notification, every infinite scroll, every algorithmically curated feed that shows you exactly what will keep you engaged 1 second longer. This is not an accident, it is architecture. And unless you are deliberately designing your relationship with technology, you are living inside someone else's design for your mind. The cost of a captured attention: when your attention is constantly interrupted, fragmented, and directed by external forces, several things happen that you may not have consciously noticed. Your capacity for deep thinking diminishes. Deep thinking, the kind that leads to genuine insight, original ideas, and complex problem solving, requires sustained, uninterrupted concentration. The research on this is consistent. Even having your phone in the room, face down, reduces cognitive performance. The mere possibility of interruption is enough to fragment focus. Your emotional regulation suffers. Much of what social media is designed to serve you is emotionally activating content: outrage, fear, comparison, and desire. Because activated people stay longer. Over time, a steady diet of emotional activation without resolution trains your nervous system into a kind of chronic low-grade stress response. You become more reactive, less spacious, more easily triggered. Your sense of self becomes externally referenced. When you constantly measure yourself against curated representations of other people's lives, your sense of who you are and what is enough gradually becomes hostage to comparison. Identity requires some degree of privacy, time alone with your own thoughts, values, and experiences, without the constant noise of what everyone else is doing and who they are. Reclaiming your mind, practical sovereignty. Mental sovereignty is not about rejecting technology. It is about choosing your relationship with it rather than having that relationship chosen for you. Here are the practices that consistently make the most difference. Right arrow: create phone-free zones and times. The first hour of your morning and the last hour before sleep are particularly important. What you feed your mind at the edges of the day shapes your mental environment more than almost anything else. Right arrow: turn off all non-essential notifications. Every notification is a micro-interruption, and micro-interruptions compound into a profoundly fractured inner life over time. Practice boredom deliberately. Boredom is the soil from which creative thought grows. When you feel the urge to reach for your phone, pause, sit with the discomfort of not being stimulated for a moment. Notice what arises. Right arrow: develop a meditation or contemplative practice. The research on this is now robust enough to be beyond debate. Regular contemplative practice, even 10 minutes a day, measurably increases attention span, emotional regulation, and the capacity for clear, independent thinking. Right arrow: read long form. The act of reading a book, a real book from beginning to end, is a practice in sustained attention that is increasingly countercultural and increasingly valuable. The most radical act of self-determination in 2026 is deciding deliberately and repeatedly where to direct your attention. Your attention is your life. Guard it as you mean it. Part 3, Building Your New Life. Chapter 6, Designing a Human-First Career. The career ladder is not just outdated. In many industries, it has been quietly dismantled while people were still climbing it. The assumption that you would work for one or two organizations over the course of your career, progress through clearly defined rungs, and retire with a predictable income was already straining under the pressures of the gig economy and digital disruption. Automation has accelerated that strain into something that, for many people, looks like collapse. But here is the thing about the collapse of old structures: they make room for new ones. And the new career structure emerging from this disruption is, in many ways, far better suited to human beings than the one it replaces. From job security to skill security, the old model offered job security. The new model offers skill security, which is actually more durable. A job can be eliminated. A skill, especially an irreplaceable human skill, travels with you everywhere, cannot be outsourced, and becomes more valuable the scarcer it is. This means that the central career question shifts from how do I get a good job to how do I develop skills that will always be in demand. And the skills that will always be in demand, as we have established, are the ones that serve human needs in deeply human ways. Practically, this means identifying the intersection of three things: what you are genuinely good at, what you find deeply meaningful, and what the world around you actually needs. Where those three things overlap is where your human-first career lives. Building for portfolio, not position. In 2026, a growing number of people are building what is sometimes called a portfolio career, a collection of complementary income streams and activities that together constitute their working life, rather than a single role at a single organization. This model has significant advantages. It is resilient that the failure of one stream does not collapse the whole. It is a variety of activities that engage different aspects of your intelligence and prevent the kind of stagnation that comes from doing the same thing forever. And it is increasingly aligned with how the economy actually works, valuing specific expertise and human judgment delivered flexibly, rather than full-time presence in a single role. Building a portfolio career requires a different kind of thinking than climbing a ladder. It requires knowing what you offer at a granular level, communicating that value clearly, and developing an entrepreneurial mindset that seeks out opportunities rather than waiting for permission. Write a human value statement, a clear, honest articulation of the specific human capacities you bring that AI cannot replicate. This is not a CV. It is a clear document for yourself. Identify 3 ways your core human skills could generate value outside your current role or industry, not as a plan, just as an exploration. Find one community of people who are navigating similar questions. The transition to a human-first career is much more manageable when undertaken with others. Chapter 7, The Long Game, Staying Human in a Shifting World. This book will be out of date in some ways within a year of its publication. The AI landscape moves faster than publishing cycles, and whatever specific developments I describe today may be superseded by the time you read these words. But the core truth of this book will not go out of date, because it is not really about AI. It is about what it means to be human in any era, and specifically in one that is forcing us to answer that question with greater clarity and urgency than we have in a long time: the qualities that endure. In every era of technological disruption, the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, the digital revolution, the people who navigated the transition most successfully were not the ones who clung hardest to what had been, nor the ones who abandoned everything to chase what was new. They were the ones who held on to what was essential while remaining genuinely curious about what was becoming. What is essential is not a skill set, it is a way of being. It is curiosity, the willingness to keep learning, to be wrong, to start over. It is the ability to build and sustain genuine relationships of trust and mutual care. It is creativity, the refusal to be passive in the face of a changing world. And it is the purpose of the orienting sense of what matters to you and why that gives meaning to the choices you make every day. A letter to the future. Here is what I want you to know. Whatever year you're reading this in, whatever the machines can do by now, you are not the sum of your outputs. You are not your productivity, your efficiency, your measurable contributions. You are a conscious, feeling, meaning-making creature in a universe that is almost entirely unconscious and indifferent. That is extraordinary. That is irreplaceable. That is the human edge. The world is changing fast. Some of those changes will be disorienting, even painful. But disorientation is not destruction. It is the feeling of growing beyond a structure that no longer fits. Be curious, be kind, be present, make things, connect with people, find what matters to you and orient your life around it. Take care of your mind, build slowly and with intention. These things will never go out of style because they are not strategies. They are what it means to be alive. You are not competing with machines, you are completing them. The future belongs